I found the listing on Facebook Marketplace. Room for rent, $400 per month. Utilities included. Female only. Fully furnished. Available immediately. Too good to be true, right? That's what I thought at first. But then I clicked on the pictures, clean, cozy, with brand new bedding and furniture that looked straight out of an IKEA catalog. The ad had been posted just minutes earlier. I was desperate to move out of my tiny studio, so I messaged the poster right away. Within 5 minutes, I got a reply from Linda. "Hi, Sarah. The room is still available. Can you come by today?" Smiling face with smiling eyes, she seemed nice, maybe a little too eager, but I told myself she was just excited to find a tenant. We arranged a time, and a few hours later, I stood outside her townhouse. Linda was normal, late 30s, soft-spoken, with straight brown hair and glasses that made her look like a librarian. She greeted me with a warm smile and invited me in. Everything inside looked just like the pictures, pristine, almost staged. The bed had fresh sheets, the walls had been freshly painted, and there was even a little welcome basket on the dresser with toiletries, snacks, and a handwritten note. "Welcome home." Smiling face with smiling eyes, I should have questioned it then. Who does that for a stranger moving into their spare room? But I was so relieved to have found something so perfect that I brushed off the nagging feeling in my gut and signed the lease that night. For the first few days, everything seemed fine. Linda was quiet, barely home, and when she was, she mostly stayed in her room. No weird house rules, no passive-aggressive notes. It was almost too easy. Then, one evening, I went to grab something from the kitchen and noticed my lease on the counter. I picked it up, flipping through the pages absent-mindedly until I saw it. My name wasn't on it. I knew I had signed it. I remembered sitting at this exact table while Linda watched, but there it was, blank. The tenants section had been left empty. My stomach twisted as I flipped through the rest of the document. Nowhere did it mention my name. No signature, no date. I took a deep breath and knocked on Linda's door. "Hey, I was just looking at the lease, and I think there's been a mistake. My name's not on it." Linda looked up from her book, her expression briefly freezing before she smiled. "Oh, that's strange. Must have been a printing error. Don't worry, I'll fix it tomorrow. Do you have the original copy? The one I signed?" She hesitated. "I must have misplaced it. But don't worry, I'll redo it." Something about the way she said it made my skin crawl. That night I couldn't sleep. My mind kept replaying the conversation. Something wasn't right. Around 2 a.m., I decided to snoop. I felt bad about it, but I needed answers. I started in the kitchen, checking drawers and cabinets, but they were all filled with normal stuff: utensils, cleaning supplies, receipts. Then I moved to the hallway closet. That's when I found it. A stack of papers shoved in a shoebox. Utility bills, old receipts, and then missing person flyers. My heart stopped. My own face stared back at me from the top one. Missing, Sarah Green. Last seen, September 2023. I dropped the flyer like it burned me. My breath hitched as I picked up another one. Missing, Emily Ward. Last seen, July 2023. There were more. 5, 6, maybe even 10. Each had different names, different faces, but the same address. I clamped a hand over my mouth, forcing myself to stay quiet. My whole body was trembling. I needed to leave. Now, I crept back to my room, grabbed my phone and keys, and went straight to the door. I turned the knob. Locked. Not just locked. Deadbolt. From the outside. Going somewhere? Linda's voice was soft, almost gentle, right behind me. I turned slowly. She stood in the dim hallway, her head tilted, watching me with something that wasn't quite a smile. "Why would you want to leave?" she whispered. "You just got here." Again, my stomach dropped. Again, I took a step back, my heart pounding so hard I could barely hear anything else. "Linda, what's going on?" I stammered. She sighed, almost disappointed. "I told you not to go through my things. You always do this." Every time, I didn't understand. My mind raced, trying to make sense of what she was saying. "This happens every time," she continued. "You always get suspicious. You always try to run. But don't worry. We'll fix it. We always do. I lunged for my phone, but she was faster. She grabbed my wrist with surprising strength and twisted it, making me cry out. My phone clattered to the floor. "Shh," she soothed. "It's okay, Sarah. You just need some rest. Everything will be fine in the morning." She pulled a syringe from her pocket. And then, darkness. When I woke up, I was in my bed. The sun was shining. Birds were chirping outside the window. I sat up, my head throbbing. My phone was back on my nightstand. My keys, my purse. Had I dreamed it? I jumped out of bed and ran to the door. It opened easily. No deadbolt, no lock. I rushed to the kitchen, my hands shaking. The flyers, the shoebox, gone. Everything looked normal. Too normal. Like nothing had ever happened. And then I saw it. A new welcome basket. Fresh toiletries. A bag of chocolates. A handwritten note. "Welcome home, Sarah." I moved in with Darren about 3 months ago. He seemed like a decent guy. Quiet, polite, kept to himself. The kind of roommate you hope for. Rent was cheap, the apartment was clean, and he had been living there for a while, so I figured he was responsible enough. First, everything was normal. We weren't exactly close, but we'd chat sometimes, have a beer after work. Darren was a little odd, sure. He had this habit of standing too still, like he forgot how to act natural when people were around. And he never seemed to go out, but hey, some people are just home buddies. Then, about a month in, something weird happened. We had a few drinks one night, nothing crazy. I remember laughing, talking about work, and then nothing, just a gap. I woke up in my bed the next morning feeling wrong. Not hungover, not sick, just off. My limbs felt heavy, and my head was foggy, like I had been in a deep sleep for days. I chalked it up to drinking more than I thought. But then it happened again, and again. Each time, the same thing. We'd have a drink, I'd black out completely, and wake up feeling groggy and disoriented. I started noticing little things too. Bruises on my arms, my phone missing chunks of data, messages wiped clean. Once, my bed sheets were gone entirely. I started avoiding drinking with Darren, making excuses, but the blackouts didn't stop. Some nights, I'd have no memory of even going to bed. I started waking up at weird hours, heart pounding, covered in sweat, feeling like I had just escaped from something I couldn't remember. I tried to brush it off, tell myself I was overreacting, but the fear was growing. I wasn't just blacking out, I was losing time. The breaking point came when I woke up one morning and my bedroom door, which I always locked, was wide open. Darren was at the kitchen table, drinking coffee like nothing was wrong. "You sleep okay?" he asked, smiling. Something about the way he said it made my stomach turn. That's when I decided to set up a camera. I needed to know what was happening to me. I bought a cheap one online, hid it in my room, and told myself I was being paranoid. But deep down, I knew something wasn't right. That night, I pretended to go to bed early, leaving my phone screen on so it would seem like I fell asleep watching something. Then I just lay there waiting. At some point, exhaustion took over. I drifted off. I woke up feeling like my limbs were filled with lead. My mind was swimming sluggish. I reached for my phone, barely able to lift my arm. The screen was dark. The camera. I forced myself up, every movement slow and uncoordinated. My heart was pounding as I grabbed my laptop and checked the footage. Started off normal. Me getting into bed, scrolling on my phone. An hour passed, then 2. I lay there still. Then movement. The door creaked open. Darren stepped inside. He moved so casually, like he had done this 1,000 times. He walked right up to my bed and stood there for a moment, just watching me. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out a syringe. I stopped breathing. He knelt down and carefully, methodically, injected something into my arm. I didn't even twitch. He waited a few moments, checking my pulse like a doctor. Then, satisfied, he pulled back the covers and he lifted me, carried me out of the room. The video kept rolling. Minutes passed, then an hour, and then The door opened again. Darren came back, still carrying me. My body was limp, head lolling against his shoulder. He laid me back down, straightened the sheets, smoothed my hair like a parent tucking in a child. Then he stood there watching me for a long time, and then he left. The footage ended. I sat there, frozen, staring at the screen. My body was screaming at me to run, to get out, to do something, but I couldn't move. What had he been doing to me? Where had he taken me? And how long had this been going on? I don't remember packing. I barely remember running down the stairs. I found the apartment listing on Craigslist. $600 a month for a one-bedroom in a decent neighborhood. Utilities included. The only catch: the landlord, Greg, lived in the unit upstairs. The ad described him as quiet and keeps to himself. Given the rental market, I figured I could deal with a little awkwardness if it meant affordable rent. Greg seemed normal enough when I met him. Mid-50s, a little pale, with thinning hair and a habit of avoiding eye contact. He barely spoke as he handed me the lease agreement, just mumbled something about the house being old and the walls being thin. I got the keys, moved in the next day, and honestly, I didn't think much about him after that. The first few nights were uneventful. I'd hear him shuffling around upstairs, sometimes muttering to himself, but it wasn't anything that set off alarm bells. But about a week in, I started noticing little things. My closet door, which I always kept shut, would be slightly open in the morning. My bathroom light, which I was sure I'd turned off, would be on. And once, my phone charger was unplugged and neatly coiled on my nightstand. Nothing big, just weird. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe I was just tired. Maybe I was forgetting things. I convinced myself it was nothing, until one night when I woke up feeling off. You know that feeling when someone's watching you? I sat up and looked around, but my room was empty. The apartment was silent. Still, my heart was pounding for no reason. The next day, I told myself I was being ridiculous, but the unease wouldn't go away. So I bought a cheap security camera on Amazon and set it up facing my bedroom door, just for peace of mind. I told myself I'd check it in the morning and prove that I was just being paranoid. I barely slept that night. The feeling of being watched was stronger than ever, but the exhaustion eventually won, and I drifted off sometime around 2 a.m. In the morning, I grabbed my phone and pulled up the footage. The first few hours were boring, just me tossing and turning. Then, at exactly 3:04 a.m., my bedroom door creaked open. Greg stood in the doorway. He didn't move for a long time, just stood there staring. My stomach turned as I watched him step inside, moving so slowly it was almost unnatural. He walked to the foot of my bed, stood there for 5 minutes, and then, without making a sound, turned and left, shutting the door behind him. I watched the clip over and over, hoping there was some kind of mistake. Maybe sleepwalking? When I first moved into the apartment, I thought I had lucked out. The rent was cheap, the place was decent, and my roommate, Ross, seemed normal enough. He was polite, quiet, and always paid his share on time. Honestly, he was the ideal roommate, at least at first. The only weird thing? He never let me into his room. Ever. I mean, I get it, privacy and all, but the way he acted about it was strange. He kept his door locked at all times, even when he was inside. If I ever walked past while he was in there, I could hear him moving around, whispering to himself. I told myself it was none of my business. People have their quirks, right? And he wasn't bothering me. But over time, little things started adding up. He barely slept. I'd hear him pacing at night, back and forth, for hours. Sometimes I'd wake up to the sound of him talking, but never on the phone. Just muttering, like he was having a conversation with himself. Then there were the times I caught him staring. Not in an obvious, creepy way. More like I'd glance up and find him watching me, just a second too long before he'd look away. It was subtle, but enough to make me uncomfortable. I started locking my own door at night. Still, I figured he was just a little weird. Not dangerous. But then, one night, everything changed. Ross had gone out for the evening, something he rarely did. And for the first time, he forgot to lock his bedroom door. I stood outside, staring at the doorknob. I knew it was wrong, but my curiosity burned. What was he hiding in there? It had been months, and I had never even glimpsed inside. Maybe I'd find nothing. Maybe I'd finally stop feeling this unease. I pushed the door open. At first, I wasn't sure what I was looking at. The room was dim, the air thick with the smell of something stale, something wrong. Then my eyes adjusted, and my stomach dropped. The walls were covered in pictures of me, not just from around the apartment, but from places I never even noticed him. Pictures from the gym, pictures from work, pictures of me asleep in my bed. I staggered back, my breath coming in sharp gasps. My mind tried to make sense of it, to find some logical explanation. But then I saw it, the thing in the corner. A mannequin. It was dressed in my clothes, my exact outfit from that day. And that's when I heard it. A soft creak behind me, the closet door slowly opening. My heart slammed against my ribs as Ross stepped out, his face half hidden in the shadows. He held a camera in his hands. His fingers gripped it tightly, knuckles white. "You weren't supposed to see this yet," he said. I didn't wait to find out what he meant. I bolted. I don't even remember getting to my car. I just remember the rush of cold air as I hit the street, the burn in my legs as I ran. I drove straight to a friend's place and never went back. I called the cops the next morning, but by the time they got there, Ross was gone. The room was empty, no pictures, no mannequin, nothing. It was like he had never even lived there. I still don't know what he was planning. I found my new apartment through a Craigslist ad. It was cheap, close to my work, and the roommate, Emily, seemed nice enough. Quiet, polite, clean. Almost too perfect, but I wasn't about to question my luck. When I moved in, I was surprised to find the fridge already stocked. "Oh, I picked up some groceries for you," Emily said with a sweet smile. I was grateful but a little weirded out. She had bought exactly the kind of food I liked. I hadn't mentioned any of it. First, I brushed it off. Maybe it was just a lucky guess. But little things started piling up. She started dressing like me, not just similar styles, but exact outfits. If I wore a green sweater and jeans, she'd wear the same thing the next day. I'd get pad thai from my favorite takeout place, and the next night, she'd order the exact same dish. One night, I made a joke in a group conversation at dinner. The next day, Emily repeated it to the same group, mimicking my tone and expression perfectly. I laughed along, but inside, I was unsettled. It wasn't just imitation. It was like she was absorbing me. Then, things got worse. One evening, I came home to find Emily in my room, sitting on my bed. "Oh, I was just looking for my charger," she said casually. But her charger was in the living room. I knew because I had seen it earlier. I started locking my bedroom door after that. One night, around 2 a.m., I woke up suddenly, feeling uneasy. My room was dark except for the faint glow of the streetlights through the blinds. My eyes adjusted, and that's when I saw her. Emily was standing in the doorway, perfectly still, just watching me, my breath caught in my throat. "Emily?" My voice was barely above a whisper. She didn't move for a second. Then, without a word, she turned and walked away. The next morning, I confronted her. "Why were you standing in my room last night?" Emily just smiled, like I had asked her what the weather was. "I couldn't sleep." "That doesn't explain why you were watching me." She tilted her head. "You move around a lot in your sleep." "It's interesting. That was it for me." I started making plans to leave. The final straw came 2 nights later. I woke up again in the middle of the night, this time to the sound of whispering. I lay still, my heart pounding. The whispering was soft, almost rhythmic. It was coming from outside my room. I slowly got out of bed and cracked my door open. Emily was in the hallway, standing in front of a mirror. She was whispering my name over and over. "Claire, Claire, Claire." Then, in the dim light, I saw her smile at her reflection and whisper something that made my stomach drop. "I'm making myself more like you, so when you leave, I can take your place." I didn't sleep the rest of the night. The next morning, I packed a bag and got out. I made up an excuse about a family emergency and never went back. A week later, I checked the apartment listings. The unit was back on the market. A new ad, same cheap rent. And the description? Looking for a new roommate. Must be female, quiet, clean, and a lot like me.